All right, it's 8 o'clock, 8:01 actually, and the streaming software says we're live, so we're going to assume that everything's working and everything's plugged in. Looks like this cord is plugged in and this cord is plugged in, so they appear to be plugged into the right place, so I'm going to assume it all works. I always have this thought that it's just not going to work. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like sometimes this is a great way to start off the show. I'll record the morning Pitt video, a little peek behind the curtain. I record the morning Pitt video the night before. I don't actually wake up at 4 a.m. and record that thing and start yelling about Pitt football to wake up everyone in my house. I record them the night before, and sometimes I'll say things like, this or that, like we did yesterday. And I'm like, what if what if I record the morning Pitt video one night, right? Edit it, upload it, schedule it to release at 5. It releases at 5, but I die in my sleep. How weird would that be if you got a morning Pitt video and it's at 5 a.m. and you're hearing me talk in the present tense, because I try to pretend like it's actually that day. You know what I mean? And you'd be like, oh, that guy, he's talking to us from beyond the grave. You know what I mean? Or something. I don't know. So sometimes I wonder about things like that. Is everything plugged in? Is everything working? Am I still alive? Am I going to be alive when you finally view this? It's normal things to think about when you're doing YouTube videos and things like that. But this is the Panther-Lair Show, where we talk about Pitt sports and none of that other nonsense. Every week we get together for an hour here at 8 o'clock on Wednesday nights, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. and talk about what's going on in the world of Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal. That's always a big one, and we'll certainly have a lot to talk about that tonight. Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com will join us here in a few minutes. But you know what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have a lot of it, and it's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Every day of the week, Monday through Friday, we have morning Pitt videos, like I said, like I just referenced, where you might have, an opportunity to witness history if something crazy happens. We have those. We have this weekly live stream that we do on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. We have post-game shows after all the football games, and we're starting to get some for basketball as well. We did a post-game show after the Syracuse game on Saturday. We'll do one after the Louisville game this Saturday. Go live after the game until about 3 o'clock. Just see what we all thought of that, of a game that has really become a must-win game. Maybe even more so than North Carolina. North Carolina would have been an important win and a good win, but Louisville is an absolute necessity at this point. You cannot afford to lose that. We'll talk about that for sure here over the course of this hour. So we have that, and we have post-game press conference videos and midweek interview press conferences and interviews and highlights and all different kinds of things, all different kinds of Pitt videos that you'll find right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of it. All right, let's bring him in. Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com is joining us now. Jim, there you are. How are you? Last week you were under the weather. Am I wrong about that? Was your voice kind of shot? Or
yeah, I think I should sound a little bit better tonight.
Yeah, you sound great. You sound great. You taking something? Did you take some echinacea or some zinc or something?
Just some cough medicine, have some cough drops handy. I mean, that's all you can do at this time of year.
People, I feel like echinacea was really popular for a while. I don't know if people still take it. It was like a tea or something. Do you remember that?
I don't
hearing anything about
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's what are you gonna do? But this Louisville game is a must win, like crucial must win, right? The most important game of the season to date. Carolina would have been a nice win. This is a must win, and maybe it's just a must not lose. And I'm not putting too much on this game, am I, Jim?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, you can't fall into an 0-4 hole in the ACC. I mean, especially because the schedule coming up. I mean, you have 2 games with Duke, Syracuse, a team that just beat you. So I mean, you don't want to just keep digging this hole. And I think not only do they need to win, I think they need to win and kind of do it comfortably. I think they need to figure some things out. I think they just need to see the ball go through the hoop. I mean, just after last night, I think they just need one of those games where they shoot the ball well, everyone's clicking, kind of builds up some confidence, because I feel like they just need it, because I don't think they really played that well. That Purdue-Fort Wayne game right before Christmas, then the Syracuse game they kind of let slip away. So they just haven't played good basketball in a while. And I think they just kind of need to do that.
You keep using that plural pronoun they, And I just can't get my head around thinking about Blake Hinson, singular. I just, it's him. Like to me, that's the difference. 3 of 22 from 3 over the last 3 games. Like, we could talk about free throws at Syracuse. We could talk about rebounding last night. And yeah, everybody else, they were 5 of 29 from 3, even without, Hinson 2 of 11. The rest of the team was still like 3 of 18. So it's not like they shot well. But if he's not making 3 to 5 3-pointers per game, like they're in a lot of trouble because they actually did some good things last night. They held Carolina to their lowest scoring output of the whole season, held them to like 36-37% from the field. They had 8 blocks and 5 steals. I think they only turned the ball over like 8 times. There were a lot of things they did well, but the biggest problem, aside from being minus 10 on the boards, was Blake. And it's obvious that they can't win without him scoring, but like I don't know. I don't know what to make of his slump, because when you look at it last night, he had a bunch of wide open shots that just didn't go in. And then he started forcing some shots, but Jeff Capel kind of let him off the hook on that after the game. He was like, because, he was, paraphrasing. He said something like, you guys around here have seen that he'll make those sometimes. And when he does, it usually gets him going. He gets the rest of the team going. And so I think he's got the green light, and the green light's not going to turn off anytime soon. But I don't know. Is it just a slump? Or I guess, you can't answer that. So I'll ask you this: 0 to 10, 10 being the most concerned, 0 being none. What is your concern level with Blake Hinson, going forward?
I mean, I'm not like overly concerned going forward. I mean, because he's played, pretty good basketball for, a year and a half now. It's just this 4-game slump, but we all knew this team goes as he goes. I mean, that he's the team leader. He's the only senior. He's the main starter back from last year. He was second team All ACC, and he was supposed to average 20 points a game. He's supposed to contend and be one of the 5 best players in the ACC, and he was for a while. I mean, that West Virginia game will go down as an all-time great Pitt basketball performance. There's no way around it. But in the game since, he just hasn't done much, and I don't know what to place to it. I mean, I listened to Jeff Capel last night. I mean, he's right. They had good looks for him early on in that game. They got a lot of things they wanted, and this team, we knew going in, there's 3 guys that average double figures, and Ish Leggett had 4 points and he had 11 points, and that's why they lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they had that stretch at the beginning of the game where Carolina didn't score for like the first 6.5 minutes. I think Pitt was 0 of 7 from 3 in that stretch. And there was maybe 1 or 2 like bad shots, but most of those shots were like pretty good, like open looks. Like they couldn't have asked for much more, and the shots just weren't falling. I don't know if you saw, I pointed this out, or I found this out, that last year around this time, Hinson went into a slump. I think it was Sacred Heart, North Florida, and Syracuse. He was 3 of 15 from 3 over those 3 games. So not quite as bad as here, where he's 3 of 22 over 3 games, but it was right around like the same stretch of like right in that switch from non-conference play into conference play, where he didn't really finish non-conference play on a high note, and he didn't really start off all that strong to conference play, and he's doing it again here. And then after like a 3-game run, he started hitting like 3 threes per game, and then had some really hot streaks like a little bit later. So maybe I don't know if there's anything to it. Maybe it's just a coincidence that it's happening right around the same time. But if he doesn't snap out of it, like I don't know. It just makes it very hard. And I mean, like you bring up Ish Leggett, and like he's got to be better. He's got to score more. I guess he was dealing with a shoulder injury last night, so that's a bit of a problem. But it's really Hinson. We've talked so much about Hinson being their best player, being their leader, being the guy who sets the tone and carries the team and all this stuff. He was the leading scorer last year, but he wasn't the leader, right? Would you agree about that?
Oh, yeah.
So is he possibly not, and this doesn't entirely correlate to his shooting, but is he possibly not cut out? Does he need a leader on the team, and he is the big, 6'7" scorer on the wing?
I don't know, but I kind of go back to, you mentioned that Syracuse game last year, and he didn't shoot the ball well, but he still had 25 points and 13 rebounds, if I recall. Like, he was still productive. And that's what they're missing right now. And that's what he was supposed to work on. Like if the threes aren't falling, he's supposed to have, added more to his game. He should be able to drive more. He should be able to post up more. And we didn't really see that last night. And anytime he tried to drive, he struggled. I mean, North Carolina was able to take away his dribble. So, I mean, I think in that sense, that's a little bit concerning because those are some of the areas you kind of expected him to be a little bit better. But, as for the leadership thing, I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't know how to measure leadership. I don't know if it's a real thing. It's hard to quantify, but I mean, maybe it would help if there was another senior in that room that would be able to kind of direct traffic and kind of have things go that way. And they just had so many strong voices last year because, Burton could just command a huddle and take over, and Nelly Cummings could do the same thing. And I think Nike Sabandi had the respect of his teammates. So, I mean, they just had so many guys last year that, yeah, they could all score. They could all do those great things, but they could hold each other accountable. And I'm not saying they don't have that this year, but yeah, there is definitely a little sense of they're missing having 4 senior guards like they had last year.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. He was 2 of 9 from 3 in that Syracuse game, but I'd forgotten about that. He went 7 of 10 inside the arc and then hit 5 free throws. So that tends to juice the number. He had 4 assists in that game too. Oh, damn. Dude was ridiculous. He had 4 turnovers there. See, Jim, it wasn't all great. I mean, stop trying to make it out like the greatest basketball game ever played. I just mean he made a lot of big shots last year, but he didn't make all of the big shots last year. You know what I mean? Burton could stop a run for the other team. Nelly Cummings could stop a run for the other team. Like he had those guys where he didn't have to be the one to do it. I don't know if he necessarily seems like he's acting like he's got to be the one to do it this year, but maybe as Bub Carrington and even Jalen Lowe continue to progress, maybe it'll take some of that pressure off Hinson. And I mean, I don't know. It's not like I think he's shooting more than he did last year. He's firing shots away just like he did a year ago. But I don't know. Something's just not clicking there. Now, I mentioned Lowe and Hinson. Actually, I'm going to bring up a comment here because you guys should get in the comments with your comments and questions. Get in the chat there because we're going to get to as many of these as we can. Anthony Tennyson says, Chris, I think it's time to go to the 3-guard offense. What do you and Jim think? So they haven't really done it much this season. I think last night was probably the most they've gone with 3 guards on the court at the same time all year long. I think I added up about 13 and a half minutes of Carrington, Leggett, and Lowe playing together. Lowe actually scored 8 of his points with all 3 of them on the court together. Carrington had 6. I think Jeff Cable felt like he had to do that last night because they needed as much offense as they could get. And the 3 spot, whether it's Zach Austin or Will Jeffers or Jorge Diaz-Graham, is just not providing any offense right now. I mean, they're getting nothing out of those guys. And so I think he went with 3 guards because he felt like he had to. There are limitations of depth, but is that something you think Capel should explore more as the season goes on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that was the most minutes Jalen Lowe has played all year. I mean, I think they needed him. I think they needed that spark, and I think he's ready for it. I mean, when I watch him play, I mean, there's never a hesitation in his game. I mean, he's not as good of a shooter as Bub, but he's probably a little more fearless when it comes to, knifing through the lane and trying to make things happen and, maybe setting up for his teammates. And I think at times, I think they could probably use that. And I hesitate to use the 3-guard lineup because they don't really have a guard off the bench. But I mean, I think there are going to be times when Jalen Lowe's going to play 25, maybe even 30 minutes, and it kind of takes care of itself. So I don't know if they necessarily need to start all 3 of them, but there's going to be games where, yeah, it's going to be a lot of Jalen Lowe. And I mean, the way he responded last night, I think there should be a lot more Jalen Lowe.
He found something going to his left and kind of going to the hoop and sort of laying it in. He did that, I think, at least twice. That I think Carolina was just like, oh, wait, what's that Jordan or Shaq meme of like, I wasn't familiar with your game. Like, I think they were like, oh, you could do that, huh? I had no idea you could do that. Yeah, I don't think they can I don't think they can use 3 guards a lot because there's just nobody else to sub. I mean, that's all of your guards. If they had another scholarship guard, if they've been able to land, and I guess we're dismissing Michael Hewitt here, although he hasn't seen the court in I don't know how long, so I'm not going to count on him. Obviously the absence of Dior Johnson, if they had him as a 4th guard or if they've been able to land one of these transfers that they try to get, that would have maybe enabled them to do it a little bit more. But at the very least, like, I'm all on board with Lowe and Carrington playing together. They had 16 and a half minutes on the court together last night, by my math. Lowe scored all 10 of his points during those 16 and a half minutes, and Carrington had 10 also. So those guys, I mean, they produced together, and I think they did good things together. I think it adds another threat, particularly if Ishmael Leggett is limited. But I mean, I think you have to look at doing that a little more. But there is still putting Lowe and Carrington together doesn't solve the issue of the three position. Like, I don't know what you do there. You don't really have a good option right now at that spot. Zach Austin was supposed to be it, but he hasn't been. Will Jeffress leaves you playing with 4 on offense, and Jorge's just not playing where he's not playing very well right now. I don't know what do you do there?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, I think because Ishmael Leggett's a pretty good rebounding guard, I think it allows you to play more Jalen Lowe, and you can do this 3-guard lineup a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I can't really figure out what happened with Zach Austin, because I had higher expectations for him, and I know he's coming up a level, and I know you can't always count on a mid-major transfer to come to the ACC and have an impact, but he's almost having like a negative impact. I mean, he's not doing anything. And I last night I thought he started the game. He had like 2 blocks. He looked engaged, and it's like that was it. He took like a bad shot in the second half. Otherwise, I don't even remember him being on the floor in the second half. So I mean, it's a tough answer. And I mean, there are times when Jorge's not playing well, but he always has like a moment with his brother. Even last night they had that little give and go dunk. They're like, if you could get more out of that, I mean, I think there would be a lot of value in having Jorge on the floor just by having such a unique tall lineup with, both twins and Blake, on the front line. But yeah, he's not giving enough either. So, I mean, it just seems in most of their losses, all 5 of their losses, they're like one player short. They need like one more scorer. They need that Nike Sabandi coming off the bench. And I don't know if this team has that right now.
In the case of the last 2 games, they were Blake Hinson short. That was the one scorer they didn't have was Blake Hinson. Jorge last night in the second half played 8 minutes. He had 4 rebounds and an assist and a turnover and a foul. 0 of 1 from the floor, but he had 4 rebounds in 8 minutes, so that's not bad. Zach Austin did play 4 minutes in the second half. Took 2 shots, missed both. One of them was a 3. He had 1 rebound and 1 foul. And that was it in the second half. That was Zach Austin's contributions. Would you ever consider, and the answer is no, but would you ever consider putting Guillermo and Federico on the court together and playing 2 guards, Hinson, Guillermo, Federico?
I mean, it would be tough. I mean, I think Guillermo has enough like step out to his game, and he can handle it a little bit, but I still think that would be asking a lot.
It's not like he's like really trying to score all that much inside, right? I mean, we were joking last night that like the scoring Pitt gets from its centers largely comes from outside the arc. You know what I mean? It's not really like points in the paint or post points. So might as well put him out there anyway. And, you can move, I don't know how well Hinson would function, trying to guard another small forward, but I don't know. I mean, like, those are your best offensive players. Well, I guess your best offensive lineup overall would be Lowe, Carrington, Leggett, Hinson, Guillermo, right? I mean, that would be your 5 best offensive players. But if you didn't want to go 3 guards, though, maybe you go with the 2 guards. Hinson, no, you wouldn't.
Well, I
play Jorge at the 4.
I think I said last week, like some, because we were previewing the Syracuse game. I'm like, they do have like some classic Syracuse tendencies. So if you just play the big lineup and go with the 2-3, I mean, if you're afraid of Hinson guarding a wing or Guillermo guarding a 4. That's one way to try to overcome it. So, I mean, I think they need to, mix some things up. I mean, I think we're going to see more Jalen Lowe. I mean, I think maybe that lineup continues to tinker with Zach Austin. I don't know, but it just feels like they need to try to find some sort of spark.
Hog Muncher wants to know if Pitt goes 500, does Jeff Capel lose his job? At what point is this just it? He follows up. He says, on one hand, we've only had one solid season the last 9 years. On the other hand, at least Capel isn't stallings. I don't really feel like Capel's in danger. Here's my thought, and I don't want to give this all away because I'm going to write about this in the 321 column on Friday. But like, I really look at it and I'm like, in a vacuum, this season would be a year where you lost a bunch of seniors. You're breaking in 2 freshman guards, and they'll have their progress and development, and there'll be steps forward and there'll be steps back, and you'll have kind of a rough year. It's not going to be a great season. You might miss the tournament. You might only win 18, 19 games or something like that, or 17, 18 games, but you have just sort of that growth year, that transition year, that bridge year, where it's just the way it works out with the roster and the personnel. And in a lot of situations, put that in a vacuum, it's okay. You have a year like that. But the problem is it's not in a vacuum. The problem is it's coming after Capel's first and only successful season. And more is expected, right? And more is almost demanded because of the years of futility followed by one good year. And then you would say, wow, he was unable to follow it up. But do you see it being that kind of like what would have a few years ago been viewed as just, it's a bridge year. You got these young guards. They just got to get better. And every sign of progress they show is positive and helps build for next year. Is anybody really thinking about building for next year, I guess, is my question.
If this was 10 years ago, before the transfer portal,
right,
you could get away with that. You could sell people on, well, we have these 2 freshman guards. We have Brandon Cummings coming in. We missed on a few things, but we'll be better for next year. But from year to year, you don't know who's going to be on your team. You have no idea which of these guys are leaving, go to the portal, go to the NBA. So it's hard to, kind of say, well, this is the bridge year, because what are bridge years in college basketball anymore? They don't exist. You build a team each and every year. And right now this team is struggling. I mean, I'm not ready to throw the towel on them just yet. And, all that, but they definitely need to start winning some games, because they just need to.
Yeah. R. Hutchison has an interesting take on our conversation about guards and guard lineup. Says, I like the 2-guard lineup, but with Leggett coming off the bench, he's regressed. Would you try that? Would you move Leggett to the bench and start Low and Carrington?
I mean, I don't think that's a terrible idea. I mean, I think initially whenever, Pitt started getting involved with Ish Leggett, like, we kind of thought he was coming in to be the 6th man. We didn't really expect him to come in and be a starter right away. And it's not to say that he can't do it, but I think at the time they landed him, they were in on some bigger guards. They were still under the belief that Dior Johnson would be around. So I don't know if he was necessarily expected to be one of their 3 best players. That's how it's kind of had to work out. But yeah, I mean, there probably is some value that his initial role probably was better suited to be a 6th man.
R. Hutchison follows up, says maybe Leggett can be an energy guy off the bench, but Lowe shouldn't be playing behind him. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what would you roll out against Louisville on Saturday? What would be your starting 5, Jim?
I think probably what they started last night. I think I would just kind of go with it again, but just with the understanding that, Lowe is a big part of this now.
You wrestle with like Will Jeffers over Zach Austin, or you stick with Austin?
I guess it kind of depends. That's kind of like a coaching staff question. It's like, did he give enough effort? Like, yeah, if his offense is bad, that's one thing. But like, it seemed whenever they benched him, that was kind of like, dude, you gotta play harder. We gotta get more rebounds out of you. So if they watched the tape and felt like he did all those things, then yes. But if not, then I mean, I think you can never question Will Jeffers's toughness, effort on all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Austin played 16 minutes in the first half last night. 16 minutes, and he had 1 rebound and 2 blocks. And that was it. I'm shocked that he played 16 minutes. Did you think he played 16 minutes in the first half? Does that number surprise you, or is that what you no, I thought he was like 4 minutes in each half. Yeah, I thought he was like John DeGroat did, you know what I mean? And just played like 4 minutes and came off the game, came out and wasn't seen again until the second half. I'm shocked by that. Zach Austin. Am I reading the right player's stat line here? Yeah, 16 minutes. He played, Will Jeffers only played 4 minutes in the first half. And I mean, I guess, when it's Austin versus Jeffers, if you need offense, Austin is the guy out of those two. But it's unfortunate that's what it comes down to. It's really too bad that Will Jeffers just doesn't give anything on offense. Just doesn't seem capable of scoring. You know what I mean? I think the hopes of being a 3-and-D guy, it's just, I mean, he looks lost with the ball. You know what I mean? And to the point where it's like concerning when he touches the ball on offense. And that's unfortunate because he obviously plays really hard. He's obviously well liked by his teammates. He gives everything he's got going for rebounds and on defense, but man, he just does nothing. And if you have Jeffers and Federico on the court at the same time, you're playing with 3, because you're not even getting that much in the way of offensive rebounds out of those guys right now. I don't know. I thought at the beginning of the season, we were like, well, this team's definitely going to score. We feel good about their scoring, but now it just feels like there's a lot of holes, doesn't it?
It does, but I mean, it comes back to Hinson. I mean, if he's making his shots, then it seems a lot better. I mean, you can't have your all ACC players, having 11 points against the top 10 team. It just can't happen.
Yep. Wolf HD says this team needs Ishmael Leggett to just drive and go for it. They need someone to get easy buckets during their gamely scoring droughts. I guess he means like the scoring droughts that happen every game. I've never heard anyone refer to it as a gamely scoring drought. Gamely. And I think that has to be Leggett. I do think Leggett, when he's been on, has shown the ability to, like, you need a guy who can make a shot to stop another team's run, right? And that could be a big 3 from outside. That could be a pull-up jumper like Jamarius Burton would hit, or it could be a drive to the basket. And I think Leggett showed that he could be that guy. He just hasn't been recently. And if that's, this injury at Syracuse or something more to it, I think that's a good role for him. But he just hasn't been putting that up. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Matt, our colleague Matt, made a point about Leggett seems to pass on a lot of open threes lately. Last night was the first game all season that he has not attempted a 3. Do you feel like he's been passing up shots beyond, before last night? Because last night, I guess it was tied somewhat to a shoulder injury he suffered at Syracuse, and that limited what he was able to do as far as practicing over the last few days. But do you feel like he's been passing up shots?
I do think he has a little hesitation on his outside shots, and he's definitely more comfortable going downhill. So to the point or the question, I agree with that. I mean, I think that is his game. I think that's one of his strengths, and I guess we just don't really know how serious this shoulder injury is. But there was an instance last night he got a pass to the wing, and he was kind of open, and he looked at it, but then he put the ball on the ground. So I mean, there is some hesitation there. I'm noticing.
Yeah. Let's see. Someone's questioning my stats. Brock H2P says Ishmael Leggett attempted 2 threes last night. According to Stat Broadcast, he didn't. According to Stat Broadcast, he was 2 of 6 from the floor. No 3-point attempts. Perhaps you're confusing him with Jorge Diaz-Graham, who attempted 2. But Ishmael Leggett did not have. Are you seeing a different stat, Jim?
I think I'm looking at the exact same Stat Broadcast, but
yeah.
I'll double check like the ESPN box.
Yeah, see if they put something differently, but I don't remember him. I don't remember him taking the shot. You know what I mean? I remember him passing shots up and trying to drive. Brock also says Zach Austin's been a major letdown up to this point. They needed a lot more out of him. The thing is, I mean, like, we're 14 games in now. What do they have left in the regular season? They have 17 games, and we're nearing the halfway point of the season. Like, for a freshman, okay, you can expect, ebbs and flows and, guys to sort of ride some momentum or, crest the wave or whatever as the season goes on. But like Zach Austin's not a freshman. He's not a young player. He's an experienced veteran player. I'm not sure if that light bulb is going to click for him magically in game 20. I'm sort of coming around on the idea that this is just who he is. And there might be 1 or 2 games where he scores 10 points or 12 points, but I don't know. I feel like the ceiling is significantly lower there than I was at the beginning of the year,
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. And I mean, it's not like he was a great shooter at high point, but there was still some volume to it. Like he still made like 123s in his first 2 seasons. So we're just not seeing any signs of that. And I don't know when it's going to come around if it hasn't by now.
I feel like he had like a drive where it looked like he might be able to dunk and he just clanged it. And like, it just isn't working. The things that he was supposed to be able to do, he hasn't done. Following up with Brock on the stat for Ishmael Leggett. He says, I could have sworn Ishmael Leggett shot the first shot for Pitt, and it was a 3. Pitt's first shot was a 3, but it was Guillermo Diaz-Graham who shot it, not Ishmael Leggett. So maybe that's a confusion. They look a lot alike. They both wear numbers that have 5s in them. I can understand the confusion between the two guys. Similar hair. No, I'm just teasing you, Brock. Brock is one of our faithful listeners. He's been around since the very beginning of this podcast, so or since I started doing these videos. So I'm not going to give him a hard time, but he admits his error. So Brock, we accept your apology. So we're not going to give Brock a hard time. Like I say, he's a longtime viewer, a longtime listener, and we appreciate Brock. And of course, another longtime viewer and a longtime listener that we appreciate is our good friend Chris Gates. Tonight's show is sponsored by Chris Gates, and his annual sale on one-on-one online fitness coaching is now live. The sale runs through January 10th. If you have a health or fitness goal for 2024 and you'd like to get on a personalized program with tons of built-in support along the way, you can apply now and get 75% off your first month. Visit chrisgatesfitness.com/coaching to learn more about the coaching process and submit your application. Make sure you mention Panther-Lair when you apply to get that discount. Chris has a limited amount of spots available, so be sure to get your application in soon. He works with a select group of people so that he can provide his clients with all the support and guidance they need. So if you're looking to make a change in 2024 with your diet, your exercise routine, or just establishing healthier habits, now is a great time to sign up with Chris. When you work with him, you get a fully personalized training program, nutritional strategy, and one-on-one support every single step of the way. If that all sounds good to you, head over to chrisgatesfitness.com/coaching to learn more and submit your application. After you apply, Chris will reach out to you directly to talk more about your goals and what a program might look like for you. One more time, that's chrisgatesfitness.com/coaching. You can get 75% off your first month of one-on-one online fitness coaching now through January 10th to achieve your goals. See if anybody else I think that's most of our basketball comments here. I want to switch over on the football side because we had a few football comments. And actually, Brock had the first one. He asked, do you see Pitt circling back on Dante Cephas? Dante Cephas, former Penn Hills wide receiver, went to Kent State, had a great career there. Went into the transfer portal last offseason. Pitt was heavily involved. He ended up going to Penn State. He didn't do very much at Penn State. He was, as a Twitter video kept showing me, one of the first players off the field at the end of Penn State's bad bowl game. He did not play a snap in that game, and he's back in the transfer portal now. Do I see Pitt doubling back on him? I think they'll make a call. They have a wide receiver visit. They had a wide receiver visiting, or he's visiting tomorrow, Raphael Williams from San Diego State, formerly of Western Carolina, actually. He's coming in tomorrow. So it's clear that they're interested in another wide receiver. Jim, I don't know how much attention you paid to Dante Cephas this season, but not a good year at Penn State. You still believe in his talent and ability that he'd be worth a shot here at Pitt?
I mean, it seems like they're definitely going to go for another wide receiver in the transfer portal. I mean, obviously there's some connections there. He considered Pitt last time, but his recruitment was weird. It kind of dragged on for a while, and nobody kind of knew where it was going. But I think they'll make the call. I don't know how far it'll get. I mean, I think they want another receiver. I'm not 1,000% convinced it'll be him.
Yeah, I think they do want another receiver. I just maybe I overvalue Konate Mumfield. Maybe I think too highly of Konate Mumfield. Maybe do they need a number one wide receiver? Is that the key? That they need a number one? They're like, Konate Mumfield is a really nice player. Dejon Reynolds seems like a very promising player. Kenny Johnson is a very promising player. Do you feel like they need a number one? Is that maybe what they're looking for here? Whether it's Raphael Williams from San Diego State or a Dante Cephas, do you feel like that is what they need or what they're missing from this receiving core?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think there's obviously room to upgrade their room, but I'm with you. I mean, I like Konate Mumfield, and I think he's a pretty good player, and I think with a better quarterback situation, he would have put up better numbers the past couple of years. I mean, that's kind of the feeling I had with Bub Means. He didn't do much in the first 4 games, and all of a sudden, he looked great. So, I mean, I think quarterback play has a lot to do with it. So, I do think they have some weapons in that wide receiver room, and I don't know how easy it's going to be to just go out and say, hey, we want a number one wide receiver, because so does every other team in the country.
Right. Sure. But do you feel that need in their room? Like, did Bub Means fill, and maybe he didn't fill the role as much as he needed to, but yeah, do you feel like that need exists in this room? Everybody might want one, but does Pitt need one?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. Because that was what Bub Means was, right? Particularly over the final 8 games. I mean, I think he was. Would you say he was legitimately a number one wide receiver for this team?
Yeah,
Not just by default, because there's nobody else, but like, do you feel like he played like a number one wide receiver?
I mean, production wise, if we doubled up his final 6 games, there's probably a 1,000 yard season in there. So yeah, I mean, they could stand to add someone that could put up 1,000 yards next year.
That would be a good thing to have. That would be a good thing. Yeah, and I don't really know what to expect out of Sincere Lee, the Western Carolina transfer. So maybe somebody beyond that. All right, this keeps getting brought up, so we'll go to it here with Ryan. Confidence level that Pitt lands the following 3 transfers: Raphael Williams, Eli Holstein, and Key Thompson. Are we pursuing Jalen McMurray from Temple? I'll start with the last one. I don't know. I've been trying to make contact with McMurray. I'm trying to get a feel for it. Defensive back out of Temple. They could probably use another corner, even though they got Tamon Lynham from Nebraska. They could use one more. I don't know. Do you have have you seen anything like Twitter wise or anything connecting McMurray and Pitt?
Not so much.
Yeah, me neither. So we'll keep an eye on that and keep trying to figure that out. Raphael Williams, Eli Holstein, Key Thompson. So Raphael Williams is the wide receiver from San Diego State, formerly of Western Carolina, visiting tomorrow. Here's what I know about Raphael Williams. On Saturday, I reached out to him because I reached out to him last year when he went into the portal from Western Carolina, and he hadn't heard from Pitt at all last year. And so on Saturday, I reached out to him like, hey, how about this time? Because it was weird. There were all these like, Marquez Williams was pushing for him on Twitter, saying that Taekwon Underwood should go after Raphael Williams, and Sincere Lee and Desmond Reed were saying all this stuff about Underwood and Bell should go after. And so I'm like, what is going on here? And I was like, oh, is this guy really Pitt heavy? And he was retweeting everything that everybody said about him. But he's from Fort Lauderdale, which I think creates a connection with Marquez Williams. And he played at Western Carolina, so he's a connection with Lee and Reed. So I reach out to him, though. I'm like, hey, you talking to Pitt this time? Nope, but I hope so. I hope to hear from them, but I'm not hearing from them. So on Saturday, he had not heard from them. Obviously, in the last few days, he has heard. What's relevant to me is he was really hoping to hear from Pitt. So I think if they decide to push for him, if he's the wide receiver that they want, and maybe Cephas gets into that conversation, we'll have to see what we can find out. If he's the receiver they want, I think they have a pretty good chance of getting him. We'll skip the second guy and come back to him. Key Thompson, the linebacker at Ohio, visited today, and I think things are pointing in that direction too. And I don't know if he'll be a starter with Solomon DeShields and Brandon George. I don't know if he'll be a backup. Either way, he's a guy who had 190 tackles for the last 2 years. He was first team All-MAC this year. If nothing else, he adds experience, productive depth to your defense, and maybe even becomes a starter. And I think they've got a pretty good chance of landing him. You have any disagreement or thoughts on those two guys, Williams and Thompson?
No, I feel pretty good about Key Thompson. If they really want him, I think that's kind of where it's going. If you remember a couple weeks ago, whenever like his hometown newspaper said he already committed to Pitt
on signing day, on signing day.
Wait a minute,
committed to Pitt, yeah. He was like, no, that's not true, and well, now here he is.
But yeah, so I feel pretty good about that one. I think, like I said, they want another receiver. I think they're going to decide which receiver they want. I think Raphael Williams is a candidate. I think they'll reach out to Cephas. I think there's probably a couple other ones. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on those two.
Okay. So then there's Eli Holstein, who transferred from Alabama, entered the portal today. He's somebody that Pitt fans have been talking about for the last few weeks for a few reasons, right? One is I think that Cade Bell started following him on Twitter, although we're finding out quickly that that's not really much that narrows down. I think Cade Bell follows almost every player in FBS on Twitter, so we don't entirely know from that. But also, and I think we can share this, it was on the message boards that apparently Eli Holstein's dad was at the Syracuse game. Now, why would the father of an Alabama quarterback be at a Pitt-Syracuse game at Yankee Stadium at the end of November? I don't know, but people have been connecting dots there for a while since that. Holstein finally went into the portal today. He was a true freshman at Alabama, didn't play in any games, was a standout at Louisiana, was really good. But look, we think Pitt's going to go after him. We think Pitt's got a pretty good chance of landing him. And I would put the percentage pretty high, maybe higher than I would put for Williams or Thompson at this point. And I'm fairly confident. I think they've got a great chance of landing Williams, and I think they've got a great chance of landing Thompson. So if I'm putting Holstein above that, I guess I'm pretty, feeling pretty optimistic about Pitt's chances there. What's the right question I want to ask you here, Jim? I guess just generally, if they were to add this guy, all right, a 4-star quarterback, a guy who was, top 10 quarterback prospect in the class of 2023, ranked 1 or 2 spots ahead of Kenny Minchie, nonetheless. But if, they add him and bring him into this room, you're not bringing in a redshirt freshman with no experience, with sort of a promise of being a starter, right? I mean, that's not it. He's got to be in competition, right? Is that what you're looking for most out of bringing in a transfer like this? Is someone you've got, to use a baseball term, years of control, because he'll only be a redshirt freshman, and he can compete with Nate Yarnell and Christian Bayer to for the starting job this year and beyond.
Yeah, I was having this conversation today, and I truly think it needs to happen, and I think it will happen. I think there just needs to be a flat-out open quarterback competition this year, and I think with a new offensive coordinator, he can go in and make that decision. As Pat Narduzzi said many times this year, he leaves it up to the offensive coordinator. So I think it really comes down to Kate Bell. He's going to look at his 2 incumbent options, and if they were to add Eli Holstein or another transfer, I do think you just have to have an open mind and an open competition. I don't think you can promise a job to anyone after what just happened the past 2 years. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but yeah, Keaton Slovis and Phil Drakova came to Pitt to start. We all know that. But yeah, I mean, I think with a guy like Holstein, you can't promise him the job. I mean, he's never played a game, and you have 2 options that have. So I think it just needs to be an open competition. And if he comes in, wows everyone in spring ball, and does everything great during fall camp, and he wins the job, then so be it. But yeah, when you add a redshirt freshman, that's not someone you're saying like, all right, here are the keys to the offense. I'd be a little surprised by that.
Yeah. You go into spring camp. Nate Yarnell is your number 1?
Me, yes, but I don't know how Cade Bell views the situation, because I mean, I think Nate Yarnell played the better of the 2, but I think just going back to tools, athleticism, arm strength, I mean, it would be easy for Cade Bell to look at Christian Bayer and be like, this dude's pretty talented. I mean, he just needs to clean up his turnovers, but physically, I mean, he looks like the quarterback you would, kind of want. But
right.
I mean, me personally, after watching what happened, I would lean towards Yarnell, but
right.
I think the offensive coordinator kind of has to have an open mind.
I agree. Ryan wants to know, are we still trying to land a defensive tackle? I think they probably should, right? I mean, they got Nick James. They could move Nikai Johnson. I don't know. Still don't feel great about that group unless Sean Fitzsimmons and Isaiah Neal take a big step forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still think they need one. I mean, I think at this time we were a little worried a couple weeks ago if they would even sign Francis Brew, and they did. So, they're bringing 2 4-star freshmen into the fold, and I mean, that's great, but Isaiah Neal was a freshman this past year and didn't play, so it's kind of hard to expect a freshman to come in and just get on the field. But the numbers might dictate it. But I mean, I think we could go up and down the defense. They probably need another defensive tackle. I think they did enough work at defensive end. It seems like they're going for another linebacker, and I think they could probably stand at another corner as well.
Yeah. Byron Fleck wants to know Pitt portal grades, retaining players that they needed to keep, B, incoming transfers, D, to date. Defensive line signed very light in experience. O-line from NC State was benched last season. No quarterback, not even a punter. Your grades. So retaining players, Byron gave them a B. Losing DeAndre Jules and Sam Okunlola stings. But I think you almost sort of assume that you're going to have 1 or 2 key guys that you don't want to lose get away. And I think if you only lose it sort of feels like if you only lose two guys that you don't want to lose, that's actually not that bad. I don't know if I would give them an A, but B plus, A minus. I mean, I think they generally did a pretty good job, especially if you think about it as, well, they lost Jules and Okunlola, but they kept Bartholomew, they kept Kenny Johnson, they kept Dayon Hayes. Who else? Rodney Hammond, I guess. Would you put in that category? Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer.
Like,
they held on.
Tweeted it.
Yeah, all the guys that announced they were coming back clearly had a decision to make. Solomon to Shields. I mean, I think there's a lot more of them than there are, two, which is Jules and Ogunlola. I don't think anybody else, would fit into that category. So I would give them, I don't know, would you go an A minus, B plus, B? What would you go on retaining players?
I mean, I'd probably go with a B. I mean, yeah, like the two you mentioned, and I mean, I think they were kind of okay with letting Bengali Kamara walk, but I mean, like, he's still a good player, and they still lost him. But yeah, I'd say B for that category.
Yeah, and then incoming transfers, it's incomplete is part of it because they're not done. I mean, they're hosting guys this week. They're going to get more offensive linemen. Defensive line, we'll see what they do, but Nate Matlack has a lot of experience from Kansas State, and David Ojebwe has and Nick James, for that matter, have really high pedigrees. You know what I mean? You got some high potential guys that you're going to have for a few years. So I think a D is too harsh. I think you can go incomplete, but based on just what they've gotten so far and knowing they're going to get more, I would probably give them a B, no worse than a B. I think on transfer additions. You?
No, I agree. I mean, I think, when you look at transfer portal additions, I mean, there's a reason why that guy's transferring. It's like, you're not always going to get just like a ready-made, like, Power 5 starter to come transfer to your program. I mean, unless you're paying for it and you're Georgia or somebody like that. I mean, I think if you're in Pitt's position, you're looking for guys that, like Ojebwe, that's, a good, talented prospect just looking for a place to break in. I mean, I think that's kind of going to be where Pitt's wheelhouse is in the transfer portal. So, I mean, I think they addressed some needs. They filled some, depth. And I think they, have some lottery tickets in there too. I mean, I don't know what to expect from the Western Carolina guys, but, they're pretty talented. Like, they look fast. They look athletic. They might be able to make plays. So I think there's some lottery tickets in there as well. So I'm with you. I think it's kind of an incomplete until we kind of see the full haul of transfers. But for now, I mean, they have 9. I think they're probably going to get 12 or 13, maybe more.
Yeah. I was like doing the math, we have them projected at 89 scholarships, I think, right?
Yeah.
10 of those are freshmen who won't enroll until the summer, right? Isn't that the number? Or they had 19 freshmen, 9 are coming in January.
Right. Yeah.
So you take 10 off, that's 79. That means if they don't lose anybody else, I think they can only actually fit 6 more transfers in the spring. You know what I'm saying? Like, to stay under 85. Yeah. So they're actually under a little bit of a crunch. I keep saying, well, they don't need anybody else to go. But if for some reason they want to get 8 more transfers, and I actually don't think the number will be that big, they could legitimately, though, have 80 scholarship players on the roster in the spring. Which, I mean, between the transfers and the 9 early enrollees, it's kind of a crazy number. I mean, usually you have like 65, or 60, or some years they've even had in the 50s of scholarship guys, maybe not in the 50s, but in the 60s of scholarship players in spring camp. And this year they're looking at like 80 plus. That should make the spring game better, right? All that depth, all those scholarship guys.
The only thing I'm thinking of is like, because I go to a few of the spring practices and like it's always cold, so they do it inside, and like that's a lot of people to be practicing inside. Like have a full practice, like I'll just be like up against the wall somewhere. But
yeah, they're going to be crammed in on the field. That's a good point, actually. I didn't think about that because it is a little bit nice in the spring because it's kind of spread out. There's fewer guys, so you don't, you get a little bit more space. David wants to know, what do you think about the transfer from Clemson? The defensive end, David Ojebwe, on one hand, he didn't play at all. And you're like, wow, if you were really all that coming out of high school, wouldn't you have gotten on the field? And I think there's something fair to say about that. If you're a big time prospect who goes to Clemson, you should, you probably expect to get on the field right away. Maybe that's why he left. I don't know. It just seems like there's real pedigree. You know what I mean? Highly rated guy, had a ton of offers. Was obviously prioritized by Clemson in the recruiting class, the 2023 recruiting class. I don't have much of a thought on him as a player because I haven't seen anything of him in 2 years. You know what I mean? You have to go back to his high school tape. So I don't know. I look at it like, well, not that long ago, a lot of the best college coaches in the country thought he could come play for them. So that seems good. And that was like less than 2 years ago. It was a year and a half ago that those schools were saying that. So that, until proven otherwise, that sells me on it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and, they just lost a young 4-star defensive end that was a redshirt freshman, Sammy Okunlola. So they're kind of like going back a year. They lost all the progress they had with Okunlola, but they're replacing him with someone of, kind of equal pedigree. That's kind of what they're doing. They're trying to reset the clock. But, after he committed, I interviewed him and he said, Charlie Partridge was the first guy to recruit me in high school, and he was the first dude to call me in the transfer portal. And I mean, Charlie Partridge usually has a pretty good eye for talent, and if he's prioritizing them, then I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I'm still on board that train of pretty much trusting Partridge. John K says that everybody should hit the like button because it tells YouTube that we're doing a good job. So thank you, John. Hopefully everybody listens to you. Scroll through here. TRR says, so no freshman or sophomore tight ends on the roster in 2024. Why are we always in this continuous loop of never having young tight ends under Salem? The only answer I've ever been able to provide for that, and I kind of had thoughts along this line for a while, and then we interviewed Carlo Zovko a couple months ago, and I asked him the tight end question. I was like, dude, why can't Pitt get tight ends? And he was like, look, the position's at a premium. You know what I mean? Like more and more guys who are that size who can run are either bulking up and playing offensive tackle. They're slimming down a little bit and playing outside linebacker. They're bulking up sort of midway and playing defensive end. They're not playing tight end. And I do remember looking at one point over the past like 5 recruiting classes or something like that, and like seeing the dwindling numbers of 4-star tight end prospects. Like there's fewer and fewer high-rated tight ends across the country. Now the guys who are good are really, really good, and they're the best in the country, but like there's very few of them. You know what I mean? There's not that many in college football, and I think it filters down to the high school ranks that there just aren't that many good players. Now, this is not the same question as what TRR is asking. TRR is asking is just why aren't there any tight ends on this roster? Why do they have Gavin Bartholomew, Carter Johnson, Jake Overman, who just transferred in, and Cole Mitchell and Jake Rendo? Like, where's the tight end depth? And this has been a continuing issue year after year after year at Pitt. My whole thing about there being fewer good tight ends out there is more an explanation of why Pitt hasn't had many very good tight ends. Why they just can't get guys, I don't know. They'll get commitments and then they'll lose commitments. They had a guy committed this year and he flipped to Nebraska. I can't explain it. It's the great quandary of Pitt football recruiting under Pat Narduzzi and Tim Salem. I have no explanation. Jim, have you cracked this case yet?
No, I haven't, and I get Carlos' explanation. Like, if you're a premium athlete at that size, you're probably playing defensive end because that's kind of what teams value. And I mean, even if you go to a high school football game, just go to a few this year. I mean, how many tight ends are actually being used at the high school level? I mean, you don't really see these tight ends going out for passes. The tight end in high school football is just an extra lineman. So I mean, you don't like. Even Gavin Bartholomew wasn't a high school tight end. He was just this jumbo athlete. They flipped from Buffalo at the last minute and got lucky. I mean, they've tried. I mean, sometimes they'll add a guy like Cole Mitchell. He's a big athlete. Let's see what he can do. Well, he hasn't played in 4 years. So, I mean, that's kind of sometimes what you're reduced to after you get out of the top 10, 15 tight ends. And after the big, schools that want a tight end have their pick. I mean, I do think there is kind of slim pickings at times.
Well, Hog Muncher asks a fair question. Do tight ends even matter? They're cool and elite ones are really special for an offense, but realistically, it's better to have a wide receiver 3 than a tight end. Bartholomew is special, though. I mean, can't argue that. Like, honestly, I mean, like, I don't think the lack of a tight end is what has held Pitt back in the past. I think they have a weapon at that position, and they haven't used him very much. And certainly when Lucas Krull was playing well in 2021, that was a weapon, but that was because I don't know. I mean, I think you could live without major production out of the tight end. You know what I mean? Like if you have to go with let's say Cole Mitchell is a really good blocking tight end, or Jake Overman is a really good blocking tight end. Let's say those things are the case, and those are the guys you have to roll with this year. Okay. I'm far more interested in seeing Kenny Johnson get the ball and Konate Mumfield get the ball, and Sincere Lee and Dejon Reynolds and Zion Fowler and Izzy Polk and Lamar Seymour than I am in seeing Jake Renda. No disrespect to Jake Renda. So, we talk about it all the time, but is it really not that important, Jim?
I think it's a luxury. I think it's an asset, but I don't think that's a position you're going to build your offense around. I mean, if they didn't have Gavin Bartholomew for this upcoming season, they would just adapt. They wouldn't just try to be like, we need to replace them. They would, they would just adapt, and there'll probably be, more passes thrown to receivers. I mean, I think Gavin Bartholomew is pretty good. I think they should give him the ball a lot, but I don't know if there's always going to be a Gavin Bartholomew at Pitt.
If Gavin Bartholomew went into the portal this offseason and you were in charge of those entities that operate on Pitt's behalf in terms of NIL and transfer, what do you think Dan Villari would be worth? Because he looked like a Heisman Trophy winner against Pitt. So,
I mean, that was something. I would like to see Gavin Bartholomew take direct snaps because he was a high school quarterback.
We actually did anybody ever ask him about that? I mean, particularly in light of that Syracuse game. I guess did he get hurt in that game?
Yeah, no. He was. Yeah, I think he got hurt in that game and didn't play again. So we haven't talked to him since.
All right, remind me to ask him in the spring. Remind me. All right, last question.
That one.
Yeah, ZC717 wants to know who you got, Michigan or Washington?
I think I'm polling for Washington, and I also think they're going to win.
Really? Okay. Michael Penix is awesome. I mean,
he's fun.
He's really good to watch, but Michigan's defense is really, really good. I mean, and I didn't need the Alabama game to point that out to me. I mean, they've been awesome all season long, but this will be, and it's not like Michigan's offense is bad, but their defense is so good. This is going to be a great sort of, great defense versus really good offense with a great quarterback. Would you take Penix number one? Would you draft him?
I don't know.
Would you draft him over some of the other guys who are going to be out there this year?
I'm a big believer in Drake May. I went to the Pitt, North Carolina game 2 years ago down in Chapel Hill where he threw 5 touchdowns, and I was a believer ever since. But isn't Penix 25?
Something like that. Yeah, I think he's been around for a while. So
I don't know if I take that. Maybe
you don't like old quarterbacks. What are you saying, Jim? You don't like 25-year-old rookie quarterbacks?
We've seen.
What are you trying to say, Jim?
We've seen some issues, man.
I'm going to remove you from the live stream. We're not going down that road.
I don't want to go down that road either.
This is a way to get away from all that. This is not the place, Jim. This is not the place. All right. Well, it's just about 9:00, so I think we can wrap it up on that note. We appreciate everybody who joined in with the comments and questions. It's always fun to do these live streams because we have a little bit of a back and forth, a little bit of a talk show vibe, and we'll do it again on Saturday afternoon after the Louisville game. We'll be live. Probably till about 3:00. We're going to start right when the game ends, and we'll go until 3:00. So tune in for that. The Panther-Lair post-game show after Pitt Louisville on Saturday at noon on the CW network. Of course, we'll have Morning Pit, not Money Pit. I almost called it the Money Pit. The Morning Pit will be every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We'll have another one of those for you tomorrow. So lots of stuff for you to keep up on right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe. That way you don't miss any of our video content, and head over to the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to catch all of our Pitt sports coverage. Jim, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks everybody who tuned in. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your night, and we will see you tomorrow morning with the Morning Pit and Saturday afternoon for a live show right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.